Eastern Front, February 3rd, 1943. 2340 hours the temperature had fallen to minus 30 degrees Celsius. In the frozen darkness outside a shattered village west of the Don River, the war had slowed to a crawl. Artillery had gone quiet hours ago. Engines were silent. Even the wind seemed reluctant to move across the snow-covered fields littered with broken fences, abandoned helmets, and the black silhouettes of burned-out trucks. But beneath the stillness, men were hunting. Between two lines of trenches separated by nearly 300 meters of frozen no-man's land, German infantry waited in shallow defensive pits. Their orders were simple: hold position until reinforcements arrived at dawn. Across the white expanse, concealed among splintered tree stumps and collapsed barns, Soviet soldiers watched through scopes fogged by their own breath. Snipers. The Eastern Front had turned the sniper into something new. Not merely a marksman, but a psychological weapon. A single unseen rifle could paralyze an entire platoon. But on this night, something far stranger was unfolding. Because hidden beneath a low ridge of packed snow and frozen mud, one Soviet soldier was preparing to use a tactic that had been officially banned by command. A trick so deceptive, so controversial, that officers had forbidden its use months earlier. Yet tonight, one man had decided to ignore the order. And before sunrise, 27 enemy soldiers would be dead. Private Alexei Morozov adjusted the cloth wrapping around the barrel of his rifle. Even through thick gloves, the metal bit his fingers. His weapon was a Mosin, Nagant M91/30 sniper rifle, chambered in 7.62 x 54 mmR, a weapon known for brutal reliability in the harshest conditions. The bolt-action rifle was long, over 2 meters from stock to muzzle, and fitted with a 3.5 times PU scope, a simple but rugged optic that Soviet snipers trusted more than delicate precision instruments. At 800 meters, a skilled marksman could still land a lethal shot. But tonight, Morozov would be firing from less than 200 meters, close enough to hear the enemy speak. He slowly pulled the bolt back. Click! A single round slid into the chamber. The rifle settled again against a folded blanket buried beneath the snow, an improvised rest to prevent vibration from the frozen ground. Morozov exhaled slowly. His breath drifted away in pale clouds. To his left lay the remains of a shattered farmhouse. Its roof had collapsed under artillery strikes days earlier, leaving a jagged skeleton of beams and broken brick. German troops had occupied the ruins earlier in the evening. He could see their movement through the cracks. 4 men, maybe 5. The problem was distance. Not too far for the rifle, too far for what he was planning. Morozov glanced toward the narrow corridor of open snow leading to the ruins. It was exposed, flat. Anyone crossing it would silhouette against the moonlit frost. Even crawling would take 10 minutes. Too long, too visible. And yet the plan required it. He checked his watch. 23:47 hours. 7 minutes until the patrol rotation changed. That was the window. Several hundred meters behind him, a Soviet officer lowered his binoculars and frowned. Captain Viktor Sokolov had been watching Morozov's position for nearly an hour. Something was wrong. Morozov wasn't behaving like a sniper preparing for a conventional shot. Instead, he had been digging, not a firing trench. Something deeper, something narrow. Sokolov muttered under his breath. Don't tell me you're trying that madness. He had seen it once before during the brutal urban fighting in Stalingrad. A trick some snipers had begun experimenting with, a tactic involving multiple firing positions created by a single shooter. The idea was ingenious and dangerously misleading, but it also violated nearly every rule of sniper doctrine. Command had banned it after several soldiers were killed attempting the maneuver. The technique required leaving your primary cover, crossing exposed terrain, and setting up an additional rifle position closer to the enemy. If the timing failed, you were dead. Sokolov lowered the binoculars. If you're doing what I think you're doing, Morozov, you'd better be fast. Out on the ridge, Morozov finished tying the final knot. In front of him lay 2 rifles, his own Mosin, Nagant, and another identical weapon taken from a fallen comrade earlier that day. Both were loaded, both were sighted, but only one would be fired by his hands. The second rifle was propped inside a shallow snow tunnel, its barrel resting on a wooden support carved from a broken crate. A thin cord ran from the trigger, 20 meters long. Morozov gripped the other end of the cord and slowly tested the tension. The trigger moved, barely, perfect, from a distance. It would appear as though two snipers were firing from two separate positions, one far, one dangerously close. Enemy soldiers would search for the first shot, only to expose themselves to the second, a classic crossfire illusion. But this version went further. Morozov had positioned the forward rifle just 120 meters from the German trench line, an outrageously risky distance. The moment it fired, German troops would assume a sniper team had infiltrated their perimeter. They would panic. They would move. And movement was what Morozov needed. 02 hours. The patrol rotation began. In the ruined farmhouse ahead, a German soldier stepped into the open doorway. Morozov saw the shape through the scope. A helmet, a cigarette ember glowing briefly in the dark. Distance, 182 meters. Wind, negligible. Elevation, 0 correction. His finger rested lightly on the trigger, but he didn't fire. Not yet. The trick required patience. The first shot had to come from the forward rifle. Morozov slowly crawled backward through the snow, gripping the cord. 10 meters. 15. 20. He settled back into his concealed firing hollow. Now the two rifles were separated by darkness and distance. Two predators. One brain. Morozov wrapped the cord once around his gloved hand. The German soldier outside the farmhouse stretched his arms and stepped farther into the snow. Morozov inhaled, then pulled. The first rifle cracked. The sound shattered the frozen silence. The German soldier collapsed instantly. For a brief moment, nothing moved. Then chaos erupted. Shouting, boots scraping across frozen ground, rifles lifting toward the ruins. The Germans believed the sniper was inside their perimeter, exactly where Morozov wanted them. And through the glass of his scope, new shapes began to appear. Targets, confused, panicked, standing in the open. Morozov centered the crosshair on the first, helmet rising above the rubble. Distance, 174 meters. He exhaled slowly. His finger tightened on the trigger, and the night began to fill with gunfire. The rifle cracked again. A sharp, metallic thunderclap tore across the frozen fields. Through the scope, Private Alexei Morozov saw the second German soldier jerk violently backward as the 7.62 times 54 mmR round struck high in the chest. The force hurled him against the broken wall of the farmhouse before he collapsed into the snow. 2 shots, 2 kills. But the illusion was only beginning. Morozov cycled the bolt of his Mosin, Nagant M91/30 with practiced speed. Clack! The spent brass casing spun out into the snow beside him. Another cartridge slid into place. Around the ruined building, German soldiers scrambled for cover, shouting over one another as they tried to identify the direction of the attack. Some pointed toward the ruins, others toward the ridge. To them, it sounded like 2 different rifles firing from 2 different positions, exactly as Morozov intended. Yet the deadly effectiveness of this deception depended on more than clever positioning. It depended on the brutal simplicity of the weapon in his hands. The Mosin Nagant M91/30 was not a refined rifle. In fact, compared to precision machine German Karabiner 98K, it was crude. But in the unforgiving climate of the Eastern Front, crude could mean survival. The rifle's design dated back to 1891, when Imperial Russia adopted the original Mosin, Nagant after trials against European bolt-action rifles. The weapon evolved over decades, eventually becoming the M91/30 variant that Soviet snipers now carried into the war. It fired the 7.62 times 54 mmR cartridge, one of the oldest military cartridges still in use at the time. The round was powerful, extremely powerful, with a muzzle velocity of nearly 865 meters per second. The bullet carried tremendous kinetic energy even beyond 800 meters. At closer distances, like the engagement unfolding tonight, the impact was devastating. Heavy winter clothing offered almost no protection. Morozov had seen the results many times before. But power alone did not make the Mosin, Nagant ideal for sniper work. Its real advantage was durability. The rifle's bolt system used large, rugged components with generous tolerances. Dirt, ice, and frozen grease rarely stopped it from functioning. Even when neglected for weeks in the trenches, the weapon would still fire. German snipers often relied on the beautifully engineered Carabiner 98K, fitted with high-quality optics and smoother bolt action. But that precision came at a cost. Extreme cold could stiffen the finely machined mechanisms. Dust and debris could interfere with the tighter tolerances. In contrast, the Mosin Nagant was brutally forgiving. A soldier could drop in mud, freeze it overnight, wipe the bolt with sleeve, and it would still chamber the next round. That reliability was one reason Soviet sniper schools favored it. The other was simplicity. The rifle was long, heavy, unrefined, but for a sniper lying motionless in snow for hours, those traits could become advantages. The extended 730mm barrel allowed the propellant gases to fully accelerate the bullet, producing higher velocity and flatter trajectory. Less bullet drop meant fewer adjustments, and fewer adjustments meant faster shots. Morozov needed speed tonight, because the illusion he had created would not last long. Inside the farmhouse ruins, the German soldiers were beginning to understand something was wrong. Two shots had come from different directions. One had clearly originated from within the perimeter, the other from somewhere beyond the ridge. That suggested a two-man sniper team, a dangerous but plausible scenario. German doctrine warned soldiers about such tactics. Sniper pairs could trap troops between two firing points, forcing them to expose themselves when attempting to locate the shooter. Yet something about the pattern felt strange. The interval between shots was too perfect, too controlled. Morozov fired again. Crack! A third German soldier fell while attempting to drag the first casualty back inside. 3 kills. Still no clear direction of attack. Panic began spreading through the ruined structure. Morozov adjusted the PU scope slightly with his glove fingers. The optic was simple, far simpler than the scopes used by German snipers. The PU, Pritzel Ukharachny, magnified the image only 5 times. By comparison, German optics like the ZF-39 offer higher magnification and superior glass clarity. But the Soviet scope had a key advantage. It was compact, lightweight, and nearly indestructible. Its thick steel body protected the lenses from shock, and the adjustment knobs were large enough to operate even while wearing winter gloves. In the frigid darkness of the Eastern Front, practicality often outweighed precision. Morozov scanned the farmhouse again. Through the scope, movement flickered in the shadows. A helmet, a rifle barrel. Someone crouched behind a broken doorframe. Distance, 168 meters. The man leaned slightly to the side, trying to spot the shooter hidden somewhere beyond the ridge. Morozov squeezed the trigger. Crack! The soldier dropped instantly. 4. Still no return fire toward Morozov's real position. Every German, rifle pointed toward the forward sniper location. The rifle attached to the cord. The deception was working perfectly. But the tactic had been banned for a reason. Earlier in the war, Soviet snipers experimented with the technique, had encountered a deadly flaw. If the enemy advanced toward the forward rifle position, they would discover the trick. And the moment the illusion collapsed, the sniper controlling both weapons would be trapped alone against multiple enemies. Captain Viktor Sokolov knew this well. Watching through binoculars from the Soviet lines, he counted the flashes of gunfire. 4 for confirmed shots. Yet he could still see the faint silhouette of Morozov's original rifle lying forward in the snow. Sokolov cursed quietly. You reckless idiot. Because if the Germans decided to sweep the ruins and surrounding ground, they would inevitably find the hidden rifle. And then the entire German position would shift its focus toward the ridge, toward Morozov. Inside the farmhouse, a German sergeant finally took control. Spread out, he shouted in harsh whispers. 2 shooters, one outside, one in the ruins. His men obeyed quickly. 3 soldiers slipped out the rear of the shattered building, moving carefully along the frozen ditch behind the structure. Their objective was simple: find the forward sniper, eliminate him, then turn their attention toward the distant shooter on the ridge. Morozov saw them, 3 dark figures creeping through the snow. Distance, 143 meters. Too close. If they reached a hidden rifle, the deception would end immediately. Morozov glanced at the cord wrapped around his hand, then at the approaching soldiers. He had seconds to act. Slowly, he pulled the cord again. The forward rifle fired. The sudden blast erupted only 120 meters from the German soldiers, shocking them completely. One of the men collapsed before he even realized what had happened. The other two dove for cover behind a low stone wall. From their perspective, the sniper was now firing right beside them. Morozov immediately followed with his own shot. Crack! The second soldier slumped forward into the snow. The third man froze in place, completely disoriented. 2 rifles, 2 directions, and now, 2 dead comrades beside him. He lifted his head for just a moment, trying desperately to locate the shooter. Morozov steadied the crosshair on the center of the helmet. Distance, 139 meters. The trigger broke cleanly. The final soldier collapsed beside the others. 7 enemies down, and the night was only beginning. The frozen silence returned. For a heartbeat, the ridge was still. Morozov's rifle rested lightly on the packed snow. He had prepared for this. The dual rifle setup gave him an edge, but it also required precision. One misstep, and the deception would evaporate. His finger hovered over the trigger, almost grazing the cold metal. He could hear the distant shouts, muffled by the snow, and the crunch of boots as German soldiers crossed frozen ground. Suddenly, movement appeared beyond the edge of the ridge. At first, it was just a shadow, indistinct. But as it drew closer, Morozov could make out the familiar outline of a German Feldjäger reconnaissance patrol. 3 men, armed with Carabiner 98 KS, their rifles glinting in the moonlight. The snow beneath them creaked with every step. The patrol's objective was clear. Locate the source of the sniper fire, neutralize it, and report back. For them, it was routine, but for Morozov, it was life and death. He adjusted the elevation of the PU scope, slightly accounting for the angle. The forward rifle, still rigged with a cord, was now ready for precise targeting. It was only 120 meters from the approaching patrol, dangerously close for any standard engagement. This distance was audacious, close enough that the Germans would almost certainly assume the sniper had infiltrated deep into their perimeter. Morozov exhaled slowly, pressing the butt of his Mosin, Nagant tighter into his shoulder. His breath fogged the scope's glass as he waited for the perfect moment. The first patrol member stepped onto open ground, pausing to scan left and right. Distance, 118 meters. Morozov pulled the cord. The forward rifle fired. The sharp report shattered the night, like a cracking whip. The German soldier collapsed instantly, his body hitting the snow with a muffled thud. The remaining 2 froze, panic overtaking training. One crouched behind a ruined wall, peering cautiously, while the other attempted to retreat backward toward cover. Morozov fired his own rifle. Distance, 122 meters. Clean shot. The second soldier dropped. The field fell silent again, but it was a deceptive silence. From farther down the ridge, more shadows were emerging. Another patrol. Another team, now alerted by the sudden gunfire. The Soviet sniper's success depended not only on marksmanship, but on tactical understanding of the battlefield. Every snowdrift, every mound of earth, every broken wall could serve as cover or trap. Morozov's experience in the brutal winter warfare of the Eastern Front had taught him to read terrain as if it were a living map. The wind, almost imperceptible now, carried sound in odd directions. Shots could echo, misleading enemy soldiers about the location of the shooter. Another instant, another flash from the PU scope. The second soldier dropped before he could even raise his weapon. 9 confirmed kills. And yet, the night was far from over. Beyond the ridge, the distant sounds of German reinforcements hinted at the larger battle yet to unfold. Morozov had crossed the line from sniper to one-man terror force, a solitary predator manipulating the battlefield with band tactics. Somewhere in the shadows, Captain Sokolov watched from the Soviet lines. His face was tense. He knew the danger, yet he could not intervene. Morozov had made a decision that defied orders, but success required isolation. Sokolov whispered quietly, God help him if they find him. But at that moment, the enemy's radar of senses, their eyes, ears, instincts, were being outmaneuvered. Morozov had created confusion, fear, and chaos. And in the frozen darkness, that would prove to be his greatest weapon. The night stretched on. The hunter had become the puppeteer, and the enemy had begun to dance to his deadly tune. The snow glittered under a pale crescent moon, each flake reflecting the faint glow like shattered glass. From a concealed position on the ridge, Private Alexei Morozov watched the chaos unfold below. The initial German patrols had been annihilated by the dual-rifle tactic, but the skirmish had drawn more attention than he anticipated. Reinforcements were moving toward the ruined farmhouse, their boots crunching over frozen earth and ice, their voices harsh in the cold night air. Morozov's pulse remained steady. Every sniper learns that adrenaline can betray precision, and he could feel his training grounding him even as the battlefield threatened to engulf him. He scanned the ridge line and the open fields with surgical attention. At 200 meters, he could see the faint silhouette of a squad of 5 German soldiers maneuvering through the snow. They had learned from the earlier carnage. They moved deliberately, each covering the other as they advanced. But Morozov was ready. Distance to target, 193 meters. Wind, 4 kilometers per hour from the northeast. Snow density, heavy but visibility clear. Elevation correction, minimal. All variables were accounted for, as meticulous as a mathematician solving for the trajectory of a falling star. The forward rifle, rigged with its tension cord, rested in a shallow snow trench, waiting. Morozov exhaled and began the slow, deliberate countdown in his mind. 3, 2, 1. He pulled the cord. The forward rifle cracked. A German soldier went down instantly, his body slamming into the snow. The remaining 4 ducked behind fractured walls and frozen crates, desperately trying to discern the shooter's location. Morozov didn't hesitate. His own rifle fired almost simultaneously. Another soldier dropped. Distance, 188 meters. Chaos erupted. Shouts echoed across the ridge. Flashlights flickered in the ruins as German soldiers attempted to locate the source of the attacks. Their previous confidence had dissolved into uncertainty. 2 rifles firing from different directions had sown confusion, and now the psychological impact was beginning to unravel their coordination. But the escalation was dangerous. Morozov understood that with every additional enemy, the risk multiplied. The forward rifle had to maintain its position without compromise. One exposed rifle, and the illusion would crumble. He crawled slightly, adjusting his posture, ensuring that no part of the silhouette betrayed his position against the ridge. His gloves were stiff from the cold, fingers numb, but he worked with practiced precision. From the ruins, more shadows appeared, this time larger groups. Morozov estimated a dozen soldiers, moving cautiously, scanning systematically for the sniper. They were communicating through hand signals and hushed commands. It was clear they were experienced. The Germans had learned to coordinate quickly after initial losses, but Morozov's ingenuity had forced them into unfamiliar territory. The forward rifle fired again, this time with almost surgical timing. A German soldier who had raised his head above a shattered wall dropped instantly. Morozov's rifle followed, taking another target, attempting to flank the forward position. Distance, 176 meters. 8 kills. 9, 10. Every movement had to be calculated. He adjusted the PU scope to track a small group attempting to move along a snow-covered ditch. Their distance varied from 150 to 200 meters, and the wind had shifted slightly. One miscalculation, one slight deviation in bullet drop, and the shot could miss entirely, exposing the sniper. Morozov's mind worked like a machine. He compensated for the wind, gravity, and angle of approach. Every target had to be prioritized, and each shot had to have maximum impact. By controlling the battlefield from a single ridge and 2 rifles, he had turned the night into a deadly chessboard. Each pawn that moved into his line of sight was eliminated, forcing the Germans to reconsider their approach. From the German perspective, the assault was surreal. They had trained to expect snipers at long distances, hiding in forest lines or behind buildings, engaging targets slowly and methodically. What they faced now was disorienting. A single sniper creating the illusion of a team, striking multiple targets in quick succession from both near and far. The psychological toll was apparent. Soldiers froze mid-step, unsure which direction the next fatal shot would come from. Suddenly, movement in the tree line caught Morozov's attention. A second wave of reinforcements was arriving. This time a full squad, roughly 10 men, equipped with submachine guns and Carabiner 98 KS. They had flanked the ruins, attempting to approach the sniper from the left side of the ridge. Morozov had only a split second to react. He adjusted the forward rifle's aim while preparing his own shot. The cord stretched taut under his gloved hand. This was the critical point. If the Germans breached the forward position, both his rifles would be compromised. He needed precise timing. The first soldier of the new squad stepped into open snow. Distance, 202 meters. The forward rifle fired. The man collapsed, sliding down the gentle incline of the ridge. Morozov's own rifle immediately followed. Another target down. Distance, 198 meters. The remaining squad froze. Confusion and fear spread like wildfire. One soldier attempted to charge the forward rifle's position, but Morozov had anticipated this. The cord was rigged for immediate response. A sharp pull, a report from the forward rifle, and the soldier dropped mid-step, sliding helplessly into the snow. Captain Viktor Sokolov, observing from the Soviet lines, could hardly believe his eyes. He had known Morozov to be talented, but the audacity of controlling two rifles, creating the illusion of multiple shooters, and methodically eliminating squads of German soldiers was beyond what he had imagined. Yet Sokolov also recognized the danger. If the enemy discovered the forward rifle, Morozov would be alone, outnumbered, and exposed. Survival depended on timing, accuracy, and psychological mastery. From his vantage point, Morozov scanned again. The remaining German soldiers were attempting to regroup, forming small clusters behind broken walls and frozen debris. Distance estimates ranged from 140 to 220 meters. He adjusted his scope. Each movement was now a potential kill shot. Each pause, a tactical opportunity. He exhaled slowly, keeping his body low, eyes locked on the advancing shadows. The forward rifle fired again, striking a soldier attempting to flank along the left edge of the ruins. Morozov followed up immediately with his own shot. Distance, 162 meters. Another casualty fell. The Germans were in disarray. Their formations were broken. Fear had replaced order. Movement became hesitant, almost erratic, as soldiers tried to reconcile the reality of two shooters with the impossibility of one man controlling both positions. Morozov's heart remained calm. Each shot was deliberate, each movement measured. Yet the physical strain was undeniable. He had been lying prone for over an hour in the frigid snow, gloves stiff, muscles cramping, face numb from the biting cold. Every breath fogged his scope. Every heartbeat carried the tension of life or death. But he adapted. Small adjustments, micro shifts of weight, careful breathing. Every tactic honed through months of winter warfare and sniper training. The forward rifle remained concealed, the cord taut, the illusion intact. From a ruined farmhouse, the German sergeant attempted to rally his men, signaling for a concentrated attack on the ridge. But the fear was too strong. Soldiers hesitated, unsure whether advancing would expose them to the sniper's deadly precision or some hidden team. The night itself had become a weapon manipulated masterfully by a single, unseen operator. Morozov exhaled again, preparing for the next wave. He knew the escalation was only temporary. Sooner or later, the Germans would adapt, attempt to flank, or send artillery down the ridge. But by forcing confusion and inflicting heavy casualties, he was shaping the battlefield before it had fully formed. With each shot, he refined the illusion of a team, a network of snipers, a deadly web stretched across the snow. And from the ridge, controlling two rifles, a single soldier had become more than a marksman. He had become a phantom, a lethal enigma, a predator orchestrating the chaos of war in real time. The snow continued to fall, thin flakes drifting silently as though oblivious to the carnage below. Yet beneath that quiet surface, the Eastern Front roared in microcosm. A single ridge, two rifles, dozens of lives hanging in the balance, and a man who refused to obey orders, except his own lethal instincts. Morozov adjusted the cord once more, prepared for the inevitable next movement. The German soldiers were circling, attempting coordination, but their panic was their undoing. He had drawn them into his design, and the night, the frozen, unforgiving night, was still his command. By 1:15 hours, the battlefield had transformed into a frozen nightmare. The ridge where Private Alexei Morozov lay concealed was littered with the aftermath of his audacious tactics. Bodies of German soldiers, frozen and twisted, dotted the snow like macabre chess pieces. Every shot fired had been calculated, each movement anticipated, every breath measured against the unforgiving cold and the lethal math of distance, wind, and bullet trajectory. The night had been long. The wind had shifted subtly from a northeast to a faint northwest current, forcing Morozov to adjust his PU scope's elevation by several clicks. Even the smallest oversight could mean a miss or death. His gloves were stiff and soaked with snow. His back ached from the prolonged prone position. Yet his focus was razor-sharp. He could not afford distraction. Not now. Not when the enemy was beginning to recognize the pattern of his phantom sniper team. From the shattered farmhouse, the remaining German soldiers had regrouped. A dozen men had emerged, their movements cautious, rifles at the ready. Their earlier confidence had vanished, replaced by fear and determination. They had realized that two rifles had been firing at them from different directions, but they now suspected a single operator manipulating both. The soldiers whispered to one another, signaling, hesitating. Distance, roughly 160 meters to the ridge. Morozov counted each heartbeat. The forward rifle rested perfectly in its snow trench, cord taut, ready for precise deployment. The first German soldier stepped into the open, moving toward a fallen wall to provide cover for the others. Morozov pulled the cord. The forward rifle erupted, a sharp crack that cut the night in two. The man fell instantly, boots scraping helplessly against the ice. Morozov followed with his own Mosin Nagant. Distance, 157 meters. Clean, lethal, final. Another soldier dropped, trying to crawl toward the ruins for safety. Two more German soldiers hesitated, scanning the ridge, unsure which direction held death. Morozov adjusted his aim. His crosshairs centered on the nearest target. He squeezed the trigger. Crack! Bullet struck high in the shoulder, spinning the man around before he collapsed. Distance, 163 meters. The forward rifle, firing on cue, struck another soldier moving to flank along the edge of the snowfield. Morozov's synchronized dual rifle tactic had now become a symphony of destruction. The Germans were reacting slower than his calculations predicted. Panic was infectious. Coordination disintegrated. Morozov's eyes darted from the PU scope to the corded forward rifle repeatedly, ensuring both remained deadly extensions of his will. One German soldier, clearly a trained veteran, attempted to advance cautiously behind a low wall. Morozov adjusted the wind correction and fired the forward rifle. Distance, 145 meters. The man slumped into the snow, limbs splayed, eyes wide in disbelief. Simultaneously, Morozov's own rifle claimed another target, attempting to break toward a side approach. Distance, 152 meters. It was in these moments that the audacity of the band tactic became clear. The dual rifle method forced the enemy to expose themselves repeatedly. German soldiers could not reconcile the illusion of two snipers with the reality of one lethal operator. Movement meant death. Remaining still meant vulnerability to the next calculated shot. By 1:30 hours, Morozov had accounted for 21 confirmed kills. Only a handful of German soldiers remained, scattered across the snow-covered battlefield, attempting desperate maneuvers to close the distance, to find cover, to survive. But each movement played into the sniper's trap. Morozov's breathing was controlled, methodical. The frost had begun to collect along the scope's edges, yet he wiped it carefully, maintaining a precise sight picture. Every remaining enemy soldier now had a predictable path, and Morozov's mind calculated velocity, distance, and lead with near-mechanical precision. The forward rifle fired again. A man attempting to reach the farmhouse's rear courtyard was struck in the chest. Distance, 138 meters. He crumpled silently into the snow. Another soldier, attempting to flank from the right, was eliminated with a direct shot from Morozov's Mosin Nagant. Distance, 142 meters. The final confrontation approached. Only 6 German soldiers remained, scattered in fragmented positions, trying to regroup and retreat. Morozov studied them carefully. Their attention was fragmented. Some were scanning for the forward rifle. Some were searching for him on the ridge. He would exploit both. He fired the forward rifle, catching a soldier mid-crawl behind a collapsed wooden crate. Distance, 121 meters. Immediate incapacitation. The man fell face first into the snow. Simultaneously, he took aim with his Mosin, Nagant at a soldier attempting to circle toward the ridge's flank. Distance, 136 meters. Headshot. The soldier collapsed backward, lifeless. 2 remaining targets. One moving across the open snow toward the ridge. One attempting to duck into partial cover near the ruins. Morozov focused. The sniper's mind, conditioned through countless drills and bitter combat experience, functioned like a single operating system, controlling multiple threads. He anticipated trajectories, calculated wind, accounted for snow resistance, and predicted enemy behavior with uncanny accuracy. The forward rifle fired at the soldier in the open. Distance, 127 meters. Impact, down. His own rifle followed immediately, striking the last enemy soldier attempting cover. Distance, 140 meters. Clean, final. The ridge was silent. The farmhouse ruins no longer house a single German soldier alive. 27 enemy combatants had been eliminated in less than 2 hours. Morozov allowed himself a brief moment to exhale. The dual-rifle tactic had succeeded beyond expectation. He had defied command, risked his life, and transformed the battlefield into a psychological minefield for the enemy. Captain Sokolov, watching from a ridge behind the sniper, finally allowed himself to speak. "By God," he muttered, "he has done what I feared, and yet he survived." Sokolov knew the historical implications. Such efficiency, such lethal innovation, could not go unnoticed, but he also understood the cost. If the enemy had discovered the forward rifle earlier, Morozov would have been surrounded, outnumbered, and cut down instantly. The band technique, the one condemned by doctrine and experienced officers, had worked, but only because of absolute precision, patience, and courage bordering on recklessness. The battlefield was quiet except for the soft wind. Snow drifted over the frozen corpses, erasing footprints, masking the sniper's presence. Morozov remained prone for several more minutes, scanning the ruins for any final threats. Distance, 150 meters to the nearest potential cover point. Nothing moved. He allowed himself to exhale, wiping sweat and frost from his brow. The night had been more than a test of skill. It had been a trial of nerve, endurance, and imagination. Every calculation, every adjustment, every careful synchronization of the dual rifles had been executed flawlessly. In the bitterest cold of the Eastern Front, under a sky streaked with faint auroras, one man had rewritten the rules of engagement with a band trick, leaving 27 dead in his wake. As the first hints of dawn began to touch the horizon, casting a pale gray light across the snow, Morozov finally allowed himself a full breath. The ridge was his. The enemy had been annihilated, and history, silent witness to the horrors of war, had recorded a moment of tactical audacity that few would ever forget. The Eastern Front, for one long night, belonged to a single soldier and 2 rifles. The first pale fingers of dawn stretched across the Eastern Front, brushing the snow-covered ridge with muted light. The battlefield that had roared hours earlier now lay silent, an eerie stillness blanketing the frozen terrain. 27 German soldiers lay sprawled across the snow, their bodies frozen in the contorted aftermath of the night's carnage. Broken wood, splintered bricks, and scattered rifles littered the ruined farmhouse and surrounding fields. The air smelled of spent gunpowder, blood, and frost, an odor that would linger in memory long after the men had gone. Private Alexei Morozov remained prone atop the ridge, his Mosin, Nagant resting lightly on his shoulder. His breath came in slow, measured puffs, fogging briefly in the frigid air before vanishing into gray morning. The forward rifle, still rigged with its cord, lay motionless in the snow. Its deception had worked flawlessly. Morozov allowed himself a brief glance over the devastation below, his eyes scanning every shadow, every potential movement. The night's terror had ended, but vigilance remained. The Soviet lines were stirring. Captain Viktor Sokolov, who had observed the entire engagement from a ridge several hundred meters behind Morozov, finally allowed himself to descend toward the ridge. His expression was a mixture of awe and trepidation. He knew the risks Morozov had taken, defying command by employing a band dual-rifle tactic, positioning dangerously close to enemy lines, and orchestrating what could have been the death of a single man against multiple squads. Yet the results were undeniable. Morozov, Sokolov said quietly, his voice almost lost in the morning wind. You've accomplished something that few soldiers in this war have ever done. I've never seen anything like it. Morozov nodded, still scanning the terrain. Orders are orders, he muttered, though the truth was evident. He had ignored orders, trusting only his skill and instinct, and for this, he had emerged victorious. The technical brilliance of the operation became apparent as the after-action reports were filed. Commanders who had previously condemned the band tactic now studied it with careful scrutiny. The dual-rifle system, though incredibly dangerous, had demonstrated an unforeseen psychological advantage. By creating the illusion of multiple snipers, Morozov had manipulated enemy perception, forcing soldiers into panic and disarray. Each shot had been not only a kill but also a signal, a ghostly reminder of omnipresent danger. Military analysts noted the meticulous preparation, the selection of terrain with open sight lines, the use of the snow for concealment, the precise synchronization of the forward rifle and the Mosin Nagant, and the patient timing of each shot. Every detail spoke to an extraordinary understanding of both human psychology and battlefield dynamics. The method had been outlawed for a reason. The margin for error was catastrophic. But in Morozov's hands, it had become a lethal, almost artistic form of combat. Morozov's actions did more than decimate enemy forces that night. They sent a message across the Eastern Front. Ingenuity and audacity could tip the scales in seemingly impossible situations. Word of his feat spread quietly among fellow snipers and infantry. Soldiers whispered of the phantom sniper who had struck from impossible positions, eliminating 27 enemies with a combination of audacity, skill, and sheer nerve. The lesson was clear. In war, innovation often exists at the edge of danger. Rules and regulations, while necessary for structure and safety, could sometimes be circumvented when survival and strategic advantage demanded it. Morozov had risked everything and emerged not only alive but victorious. Historically, the implications were significant. The operation demonstrated the effectiveness of psychological warfare in conjunction with tactical marksmanship. By exploiting enemy expectations and fears, Morozov had achieved disproportionate results with limited resources. Future sniper training programs would study these methods, refining the concepts without the excessive personal risk. The Eastern Front was brutal, but Morozov's night on the ridge became a case study in the interplay of courage, skill, and imagination in combat. Yet even as historians and commanders would analyze the event, Morozov himself remained quietly detached. He had faced death, manipulated perception, and survived in the harshest conditions imaginable, yet he did not boast. To him, it was another night of war, another engagement, another lesson learned in the frozen expanse of the Eastern Front. In the ridge's gray dawn, Morozov finally allowed himself to stretch his back and shake the numbness from his limbs. The snow beneath him was tainted, each footprint, each movement recorded in icy permanence. He collected his rifles, inspected the forward rifle for damage, and checked the Mosin Nagant's chamber. Both were intact, still deadly. Both had proven their worth. As he made his cautious way back to Soviet lines, the weight of what had transpired began to settle. 27 enemies eliminated in a single night. A band tactic executed flawlessly. A battlefield manipulated through patience, precision, and daring. Morozov had survived where others would have fallen, had turned rules on their head, and had etched his name into quiet legends of the Eastern Front. Captain Sokolov fell into step beside him. "You changed the game tonight," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "History will remember this, if we live to see it written." Morozov said nothing, only glanced toward the ruined farmhouse in the distance. Shadows of what had been were fading with the light. Lives had ended. Yet the battle had also revealed the raw truth of war. Innovation, courage, and mastery of one's environment could produce extraordinary results. In the years that followed, the story of that night traveled slowly, first through whispers among snipers, then through official military reports, and eventually into history books recounting Eastern Front tactics. Alexei Morozov became more than a soldier. He became a symbol of ingenuity under fire, a reminder that one man, with skill, audacity, and an intimate understanding of his weapon and environment, could change the course of an engagement in ways that commanders and doctrine alone could never predict. The ridge remained quiet after the dawn, blanketed once more in fresh snow. But the memory of that night, the echo of 27 rifles falling, the flash of 2 simultaneous sniper positions, and the sheer audacity of a man bending rules for survival and victory, lingered in the air, a testament to the extraordinary capabilities of the human mind in war. Morozov's legacy was not just the number of enemy soldiers eliminated, but the psychological and tactical impression left behind. A night in which a single soldier became a phantom, an orchestrator of chaos, and a master of both fear and precision. History would remember that in the frozen, merciless darkness of the Eastern Front, one man had turned a banned tactic into a deadly art, and the battlefield would never forget